Alright guys, today what I'm going to show you how to do is how to install rail joiners and solder rails together so that you get a strong electric current between your rails, so that you don't have to worry about putting a feeder wire on every single section of track that you do. Even though it's recommended to still do it, I still do it on my tracks. I do it every 3 feet on my tracks. But for your sections of track in between that 3 feet mark, if you solder your rail joiners to the rails, you end up with a stronger connection instead of relying on just the rail joiners to send the electrical current or any DCC power. So to start off, what you're going to need is, I've got 2 pieces of sample track for you that I'm going to show you how to solder each rail together. We're going to end up with a connection together just like that. You're going to need obviously your 2 rail joiners for each section, and soldering iron as well as some solder. Now, I don't particularly go into the details on what kind of solder I like to use. I was given this wad of solder, and that's what I've been using on all my rails, and it's been working just fine. I don't know exactly what kind of solder it uses. And I got a pair of pliers here just in case something messes up. I can pull on. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is make sure that your soldering iron's hot. You can hear that where it hits and smoke releases off of it, that my soldering iron is hot and up to temperature. If your soldering iron isn't up to temperature, you'll have a hard time getting the solder to securely fasten the rail joiners. Alright guys, so first thing first, what you want to do is you're wanting to take your rail joiners and slide each rail joiner. It's a little bit more difficult to apply on, but you're going to go ahead and add your rail joiners onto the rails like here, and then I'll take my second piece of track and add it together. Obviously you're more than likely not going to be doing your rail joiners off pace like this. You'll have them already glued onto the track or set on the track, pinned in place to move on. Alright, so as you can see here, I've already got my rails put into place. I've got them joined together how I'm going to use them, and make sure that your rails are pretty well even. I'm going to go ahead and get my solder into place here with my soldering iron, and I'm just going to go ahead and heat up the joint that we've got. And be careful when you put your fingers on the rails, they do get hot. And I'm just going to put a piece of solder on one side here, and I'm going to put a piece of solder on the other side over here. Now what I'm going to be able to do is I'll run my soldering iron across both, and it'll pull the solder across. You can even put more solder right in the middle joint here to kind of plug up that little bit of a gap that I've got. And I'll go ahead and let my solder cool. I'm going to go ahead and spin this around here to the other side and do the next joint. Even if you do have that little bit of a gap, because it's soldered together, the solder actually is going down on the bottom rail. And it's actually still going to create a nice contact between the two. And if you keep the solder over on one edge, it'll actually pull the solder down and into each rail, so it's not bubbling out. But if you see here, I've got both of these joints soldered together here, and I can go ahead and pull on this and my rails don't come apart. So that means that I've got a good solder connection, even though I've got that little bit of a gap. If I wanted to, like I said, I can go ahead and fill in this gap with the solder. If I wanted to actually pull the solder around, I can actually come to the back side of this and put my soldering iron on the back side. And when it heats up this rail enough, it will actually pull the solder through this rail joint. And it may take some time here, because this does have to go all the way through the rail. You're not actually touching the soldering iron onto the solder to melt it as fast. If you can see here, I've actually kind of closed that gap up, and you can see it if I do it on the other side here. That gap's actually a lot more closed than it was.